My name is Oliver Pickard and I play with classic cars on some of the world's most beautiful roads for a living. That Porsche rear engine blood shining through. In 2020 I went to Retromobile Paris and saw some of the most exquisite, handmade, hand-finished and expensive cars on the planet. On returning home, the pandemic hit and I decided that the time for dreaming was done. I wanted to build my dream. I wanted to build the car that I had been designing since childhood. So with the help of my aerospace engineer and rallyist father, Andrew, we set about trying to find the perfect project. We found it rotting in a side yard in Normandy. Crashed, twisted, broken, buckled and fire damaged. A GTM. We dragged it home and tore it apart. Re-engineered from the ground up. Engine, suspension, fuel system, drivetrain, even the seating position. Everything. Bespoke, one of one. This is Project Mosquito. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello and welcome to the workshop. What we're doing this week?
Well, I'm going to be finishing off the front mount of the suspension and then going to move on and make the rear mount.
And you started that last week. And so
yeah.
What are you doing that's different this week?
I'm adding lightness.
You're adding lightness,
yeah,
and stiffness.
And stiffness. So it's going to be lighter and stronger.
And I'm going to be polishing a wheel because we actually need something to bolt to that side. Once we've made both sides, obviously. Currently we've only got one wheel finished. We've got the other three kind of 90% there. So I've got to finish polishing them and then we can have two wheels with tyres on.
The thing is about the engineering side of it, we're actually adding lightness and making it stronger, which is sort of counterintuitive to what people think. People think that, well, if you engineer something, you make it thicker.
You're adding material.
You're making it thicker, stronger, which is not actually correct. Mm-hmm. If you actually engineer something, you can actually make it lighter and stronger all at the same time, which is actually engineering. Yeah,
proper engineering.
Not blacksmithing.
Yeah. And so you are going to be doing that and I'm going to be keeping out your way. That's the thing, it's such a tiny car, like we can't, you know, in a perfect world, if we had a car that was actually normal car sized, I would be able to do one job on the car and Dad would be able to do another job on the car. But because it's so detailed and because it's so intricate work and because we want it to be as good as it possibly can be, we just end up falling over each other. And so I'm going to be working outside in the sunshine and you're going to be working in here in the dark. Something tells me I've got the better side of the deal.
Yeah, let's crack on.
Yep. Hello. If you've been wondering where I am, because I'm not doing that, I've been fighting a wheel, or rather, a third of a wheel. This is by far our worst rim. It was super pitted. Old-fashioned disc brake pads were full of some very, very nasty things that hated aluminium. And it was just so pitted. Anyway, so what I've had to do is wet and dry sand the absolute heck out of it to get all my nice pits out. And I did that, and then I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll do a shortcut. Rather than doing all the million steps, I'll try one of these. This polishing grinder disc. Unfortunately, because this polishing grinder disc has been in the workshop, it was full of grinder dust. And it gouged the absolute heck out of this rim. It scratched it to bits. And so I've spent hours and hours and hours and hours doing it all over again, which was fun. Oof, hang on. Bit of steel stuck in me. So yeah, that was fun. And I'm glad I don't have to do that again. So now I'm doing all the steps, not using that, and slowly but surely getting there. I've got all my pits out, or most of my pits. They're still, you know, they're all wheels, so they're never going to be perfect, and I don't want them to be, because I want them to look like old racing car wheels, because that's what they are. And I think things should look like what they are. They shouldn't look brand new, because like something that's got a bit of life to it's better than being brand new. And it'll help sell the visage of a car that is period to when this car was originally designed. So super happy with it now, but I just wish it was a shorter road to get here. So now what I've got to do is actually polish it, because up until now I haven't been polishing, I've just been undamaging, and now I get to make a shiny thing. The moment of truth. It's attached! I have looked at that suspension arm sat on this chassis table for months. And now it is officially attached, part of the car.
Okay, so we've got the front mount just tacked in place at the moment, and one bridging piece on. We have another piece to make for the back here, and for it to be welded all the way around here, to make it super stiff so it can't break open. And then we move around to the back. So we've made these two brackets for the back. We've tacked them in place again, and basically you can see that this bar, this suspension mount bar arm, isn't straight. On an Integra it's actually a flat piece, but on the CRV it's got a slight twist in it because it has to cope with the bigger articulation for having more travel. So that's all tacked in place now. Now we can sort out this mount, because what we can do now is move the suspension up and down and get this mounting point in the correct position to give us the correct amount of camber. So that's our next job.
Can I also just interject and say that this isn't how it's all, this isn't finished. This is kind of semi-finished, and the reason is you have to be able to get into it all to weld it, and you simply can't, can you?
No, it's impossible to weld down the back here. So what we're going to have to do later is engine out, suspension off, tip the whole thing upside down again, and weld these properly, weld the front piece in properly, finish off that side, weld all that in, because there's another, like an under tray to go in on the front suspension mount. So there's still quite a lot of work to do.
But such is the joy of a lightweight car that you can take the engine out of and flip it upside down.
Yeah, it's only 5 bolts.
Yes.
So it's no problem. And it's only 3 bolts to take the rear suspension off. So it's dead simple. Because we spent time getting all the angles perfectly correct, and even this, like I said before, this bracket's got a twist in it. There's absolutely no binding in the suspension. So everything's as it should be, in the correct angle.
And this is one of the reasons we didn't use the earlier Civic suspension. A lot of four-wheel drive Civics out there, there's a lot of four-wheel drive converted Civics, like Busy, Motors, Wicked, Turbo, K-Series, Vanawagon. Like, that thing's awesome. But it uses the old Mark 1 Integra style, Mark 1 CRV style rear suspension, which does bind the bush, the big rubber bush at the front is so big it actually adds to the overall spring rate of the car because it binds. And I wanted to keep it all like of the same generation. It makes sense for Biz because like his entire car, like, that's what it used from the factory, so it makes sense. Whereas because we could choose, I wanted to keep it all the same generation. So it's all Honda and it's all like 2003 to 2007, but it's all from different Hondas and it works.
If you look this way on, the actual tyre
tips on its edge.
Tips on its edge.
And that's not how suspensions. Well, it's how some suspensions, but it's not how our suspensions. So this top arm here, as the suspension goes up, will keep the tyre where we set it to statically. So it will have a little bit of camber, but as the suspension rises, it won't gain camber much.
And it won't lose camber. Which is also very important.
Yep. We've removed the spring from our rear shock absorber. And we've done it off camera because we get enough comments about health and safety. And this lock ring's seized. It won't be seized for long, but currently it wouldn't move. So we've done that off camera. And we've done it so that we can understand how much rear wheel travel we have. Because it's not as easy as, well, we've done it on paper, but we want to do it in practice as well. And it's not as easy as, oh, the wheel moves up this much and therefore we have that much travel. Because that's not where the shock absorber is mounted. The shock absorber is mounted on the arm here. And so you have a much stiffer spring than you would if it was mounted here. Because obviously it's a lever from the center point of the wheel to here. The greater that distance is away from the center point, the harder your spring needs to be for the same amount of travel. And on a CRV, obviously, tons of travel. On a DC5 or an Ep3 Civic, because they're front-wheel drive cars, they have hardly any travel at all and super stiff springs because the back wheels just get dragged on, they're not actually doing anything. So we need to understand, not just in mathematical terms, but in physical terms, we need to see how much rear wheel travel we actually have. And then we know that when we simulate that rear wheel travel by jacking the back wheel up, we know how much we're moving and how much things are going to move in reality, not just on paper, because sometimes these things surprise you. 1, 2, 3. Yep. 1, 2, 3. Re-level the table. Yeah, some people have asked me about this table. It's the best chassis table I could make in an afternoon for free. But it's got little adjustable legs on it. And by that I mean I screwed a load of bolts into the underneath of it so they can all adjust up and down. And they've got bottle cap lids on the ends of the bolts so that they're like little non-marking feet on the floor. We've just measured our wheel travel and it's bang on. It's a really nice thing when reality and maths come together. Quite often they don't, because things that are fabricated can be fabricated slightly different, and when you add all those little tiny changes together, you end up a little bit off. But in this case, it's absolutely perfect, which is nice. It's always nice when a plan comes together. Now then, we have 160 mil of wheel, no, 140 mil, sorry, of wheel travel, yeah? Which is approximately 6 inch, which is about twice as much as an original Mini. I'm a very happy boy. This is my happy face. So, we've got plenty of droop, which is great news, because that means that when the car hits a hole in the road, it can drop into that hole and come out of it again without the car falling in the hole. That's good news. And We've got loads and loads of suspension travel, which is great, and we are still, even this is at full compression. Even at full compression, we have plenty of ride height. We've got over 3 inches ride height, with a car with a flat floor is perfect. So it means that even if we get a flat tire at full compression, so if I've done something really, really wrong if we're at full compression and I've got a flat tire, but it means even if a tire blew out at full compression, we still wouldn't smack the bottom of the car on the road, and that's good, unless the road has a lump in it, but we won't think about that. You can only plan for so much. But yeah, that's really good news. So we've got plenty of sag, which is mega. If you want to know about sag and stuff, I've made a video called The Basics of Suspension or something like that. There'll be a link to it at the end of this, so don't worry about clicking away and trying to find that. There'll be a link to it at the end. But basically, our tyres working as a suspension system because we have plenty of sidewall, and that sidewall is really well under control because we have a supersonic stretch, and we have plenty of droop, which is great because that gives us loads. That's why, 1960s Formula 1 cars, Grand Prix cars, did those really long shock absorbers. That was for mechanical grip. That's so they had plenty of sag. So we've got plenty of sag, and we've got plenty of suspension travel, and that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. I'm a happy boy. I've waited so long for this. It's worth saying that GTM from the factory uses a mini front subframe at the front and a mini front subframe at the rear. But the front cones are actually machined down, the big ass bump stops are machined down. So it would have less wheel travel at the front, whereas we have the same amount of wheel travel, but we've just got different spring rates. So we've got tons and tons of suspension, and that's really good news. Because the thing is, putting in a K-Series in a GTM isn't that hard. What's the hard thing is making it all work amazingly, making it handle amazingly. Unfortunately, that's not what people click YouTube thumbnails for. People love a shiny engine, but the reality is that we've done all the chassis and all the rigidity and all of the designing and all of the suspension work to make it handle. Because this thing should handle like it's on rail. That's what makes this car special. It's nothing to do with the K-Series. The K-Series is awesome and will be amazing and will be efficient and it'll be economical because it's all lightweight and aerodynamic. And like the inertial forces, like an Ep3 Civic is a quick car, right? In anybody's book. However, our GTM will weigh half as much as an Ep3 Civic, meaning that the inertial forces are half. So the energy required to just move it, so not even like accelerate it, but just to take it from like not moving to moving are half as much, and the brakes equally. So when you bear in mind that we've got not massively smaller tyres, like we should have so much grip, and using a big chunky tyre on a really lightweight car means we can use really low pressures and still have really good rolling resistance as well.
Early the next morning,
we have been rather busy, and what all this mass of wood and jigs and jacks, yep. What this mess of jigs and jacks allows us to do is find the position of the top arm, and the way that we did that was with the bottom suspension arm at 0 compression, so fully extended. We found 0 degrees camber on the hub, and then set that with this bottle jack, and this arm not connected to anything, completely swinging free in mid-air. And then we plotted the arc of this arm and where it wanted to go, because obviously it moves in an arc when it's from a fixed point because it's an arm. From there we were able to plot how long we wanted the arm to be in order to control our camber gain. I had a few questions about camber gain last week, but basically we were able to lengthen or shorten this arm without lengthening or shortening it, which is the traditional way to do it on this suspension. People replace this arm with an adjustable one, but we're able to adjust it.
Even that doesn't give you the height.
No.
Or the angle.
No.
Right. So even if you use this height of this position is out, no matter what you do,
you're stuffed, and you get binding and all sorts.
You get binding and you get massive camber changes, which is not what you want. You actually want progressive negative camber as the suspension gets compressed.
But not too much. And if you have too much, your arm's too short. So, like I say, we set this at neutral, and then we traced that arc, and then through tracing that arc and jacking up the suspension, we were able to follow where that needed to be. And so, using the bubble app on my phone, because I'm cheap and I didn't want to pay for a proper camber gauge. Camber gauges are really expensive, actually, aren't they? Hideously so. And that's okay if you're just doing your suspension, but when you're building an entire car and you need things like door locks and relays and seat brackets and so many bolts. Yeah, I'm tight. So this is only accurate to within 0.1, and of course we're on a floor jack and all of that. So very roughly we are at
comma 2
or comma 1, because like I said, we are within. So that was at full extension.
There we go.
And now near full compression, we have
2.5 degrees.
2.5
of camber.
Now at full compression on the bump stops, we measured just over 3 degrees. Which is pretty spot on. We don't want massive camber change. People talk about modern sports tyres and the fact that modern sports tyres like a lot of camber, which is kind of true. But if the tyre's not touching the road because of how much camber you have, it doesn't matter. Yeah, because if you give a tyre a load of camber and tip it on its edge, there's a big portion of that tyre that's not even touching anything, so it's not even going to warm up or anything. And a lot of people talk about camber like it's this universal thing, but it's not. And the reason why it's not universal is, if you take, for example, an MR2, yeah? Because an MR2 is a McPherson, it's a mid-engine car, and there are K-series MR2s. And, you know, you would assume that that's all relative, but it's not, because they use a McPherson strut suspension. And a McPherson strut suspension gains, then loses, then gains camber as it goes through its axle path. And so what they tend to do is they massively high spring them, don't they? Yeah. They put a massive anti-roll bar on it.
Yep. Which putting an anti-roll bar on the back of a mid-engine car is rubbish. Anybody that does it,
it is a bit.
Is rubbish.
No, it's a band-aid. It's an engineering band-aid because you don't want to do proper engineering.
The whole point of an independent suspension is that it's independent of each other.
Yeah.
So if you stick a big bar and link them both together, you might as well have a solid axle. Because it's just pants.
Right. So, but the way that people get away with MR2s and stuff like that are McPherson strut and not having wobbly weird camber changes, because a McPherson strut as well, your wheels get closer together in bump, which is what makes a Stratos hilarious all hell, because every time you go around a corner your car gets narrower. And to prevent all of that, they spring them up to all heck. But that means that you also have to put a ton of static camber in them. So like autocross guys and stuff that run MR2s with K-series engines are running like 3 degrees and between 3 and 3.5 degrees negative camber. I never need to run that much.
Well, it's not just that, it just chews your tyres up. You sit on the motorway for a couple of thousand miles.
It's not just that.
3 degrees of negative camber and the inside tread will disappear.
It's not just that. Because it's a Band-Aid, what happens is you end up chasing it. So you have to run, because you're running wider tyres and you're running a massive camber, there's less of your tyre touching the ground, so then you have to run a bigger tyre. So you have to run a much bigger tyre than you otherwise would have, which increases your wheel rate because you're adding more unsprung mass, which then increases your spring rate because you've got more unsprung mass, which then requires you to run a bigger anti-roll bar again. It's like, it just gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
And so our camber setup is very different from that of, say, an MR2, right? So we've gone past our point of full droop and we've gone past our bump stop. And that's a really important thing. So we know that within that length, we have nice, consistent, linear camber gains.
And what we're looking for is probably when it's sat on its tyres, sat on its own suspension, you're probably going to have about 1 to 1.5 degrees of negative camber.
Yeah, nothing too crazy, because we want nice straight line acceleration. Because the other thing that an MR2 needs that we don't need is a diff. We don't need a limited slip diff. Mid-engine cars do not need a limited slip diff. And if you would like me to articulate exactly how much a mid-engine car does not need a limited slip diff, a McLaren 720S, pretty much the fastest thing, does not have a limited slip diff.
Or rear anti-roll bars.
Or rear anti-roll bars, it doesn't need them. But that has like cool hydrauliciness. Because it's not the lightest thing in the world, even though it's very, very, very clever. But they don't need a diff. You don't need a diff in a mid-engine car. Nope. Elises don't have diffs. Exiges don't have diffs. And if you want snap oversteer, the best way to do it is put a diff in it.
We'll make a mount.
Let's make a mount.
Now we've got the position.
Yes.
We've got our position here. Perfectly bob on. We can now come down from here, make a mount.
And make it fixed in space. So what we've now done is we've tightened all of our bolts off, like all these bolts.
This one.
Yeah.
So now they're in.
It's all held in place.
Held by the bushes now.
But we can take the jig off and we know it's not going to move.
Yeah.
Because all of this is now nice and tight. I now declare this suspension suspension-y. That was incredibly anticlimactic. But it is actually suspension-y. It's all attached. It's all there. And, oh, there we go. Now it drops. And it indeed do. And it do well. We can't weld it up anymore and finish it anymore now until we take all of the suspension off and take the engine out and put it on a table and finish welding up all the mounts. But it's suspension-y. Look at that. I've owned this suspension over a year and I've looked at it every day when I've come in the workshop and I've wanted it to do that. And the fact that it does that is just, oh, I'm a very happy boy. So thank you all for watching. If you'd like to watch more, there's some suggested videos here and stuff. And there's a button that looks like my face. The best way to support this channel is by sharing these videos with your friends, clicking like, clicking the bell icon, and subscribing. And to do that, click on my face. Thank you all for watching. Please be awesome to each other. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.
Putting an anti-roll bar on the back of a mid-engine car is rubbish.